got some big games this weekend. We got some big games. It is not a 3-show week type lineup. We're sitting here. It's our Thursday show. This is the SpringBlake College Football Show. Today is what, October 2nd? This isn't a 3-show week. 3-show weeks are earned to the week 5 college football slates or the week 1 college football slates. This is just a 2-show week. We got some big games to break down. We're going to do all of that. We're also going to put out the latest SpringBlake Sweet 16. We may get to best bets. We're recording this show a little bit early today. I haven't really gotten into all of my best bets just yet, but that's the plan. That's the rundown. This is the SpringBlake College Football Show. It is your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. If it's your first time here, first of all, thank you for joining us. Make sure to leave a like on this video if you're watching on the YouTube channel. While you're there, hit the subscribe button so you can see every episode that comes out after this one, all of our short clips as well too. Make sure if you are listening, Spotify, Apple, wherever you may get your podcasts, to leave a 5-star review, subscribe to the channel, and then make sure to head over to the socials. That is Twitter and TikTok at SpringBlake CFB, SpringBlake College Football, where you can find everything from this show and stuff that goes beyond this show. If you're going to be on there this weekend, you will see me doing something nefarious. I am a ball knower. I would prefer that every Saturday I sit down on my couch from sun up to sundown and just watch every game so I can come back to you guys next Monday and let you know everything that we've learned about these fantastic teams. However, I hate saying this, sometimes there is a little bit more to life than just college football. I'll be heading to a very fun music festival down in Alabama this weekend. Now, thankfully, the way the schedule plays out, I do get to see some of the good games in the early parts of the day. We will miss the night ones, but do not fear. We will watch them on Sunday. We will become ball knowers together, and we'll be back with everything we know for Sunday. So if you're on the socials, you see a little bit of fun music festival stuff that I'm doing. We get to see Shaquille O'Neal do a DJ set, Slander, Chainsmokers, Cascade, a bunch of heavy hitters down in Huntsville, Alabama. So again, if you want to just go to at SpringBlake CFB on Twitter and TikTok for more of this show, do it. But my life's also going to be there too, and hopefully you enjoy that just as much, even though I definitely do not expect you to. Okay, yeah, so as I said, we're breaking down the 3 biggest games of the weekend. We're rolling out the Week 6 SpringBlake Sweet 16 poll. Again, a power rating system, not a resume ranking one. And then I don't feel fully settled on our best bets for the week just yet. There's a couple I might hand out on the show just to say that I gave you a few. This is important to head to the socials. This is important to go to at SpringBlake CFB so you can find what you have missed out. The picks that I didn't give out, we put out a nice graphic, 5 best bets of the week. While we're on the topic of best bets, I'm killing ChatGPT. I've axed them off the show. They are no longer in competition for me. They're down almost 7 units on the season. I am up 4.5. I thought it'd be fun. I thought maybe they would actually be good at this. They're not. I guess I shouldn't be surprised because it's not like a person. It's just basing it off of computers and not. Either way, it's not good at betting on sports. And so I'm just going to give you my 5 best bets. There's no competition to it. We can just try and make money together, which we have been doing. As I said, I believe we're 13-9-1 on the year. 15-9-1, whichever it is. But we are up 4.5 units. So again, we'll give a few out today. The rest will be on social, so make sure you're heading to those. So let's kick this show off. We are in for a rematch of 2 teams that provided us with what I would call the most shocking result of the 2024 season when Vanderbilt hammered Alabama in Nashville, Tennessee for 60 straight minutes, won that game 40-35, sending Tuscaloosa into a downward spiral in the first year of its new head coach, Kalen DeBoer. This time around, the game is taking place in Bryant-Denny Stadium. This time around, it's also an AP Top 25 matchup. So a lot more shine on it this time around. So what's really changed between both of these teams since last year heading into our Week 6 game rematch? Well, for one, they've both gotten, in my opinion, significantly better. And both. I mean both when I say that. For Vanderbilt, this offensive line is hands down the best of the Clark Lee era, which dates, I believe, 4 or 5 seasons now. It's the best offensive line they've had, which really feeds into their style of play. They run the hell out of the football, including plenty of gritty runs from its starting quarterback, Diego Pavia. And tied into that, I think this is one of the few teams in the country. I think there are few teams in the country that have a stronger, more unified identity than the Commodores, which has been the catalyst for all of their success dating back to the midway point of the 2024 season. They know who they are. They know their brand of football. It's almost to me like a heightened version of the service academies where, you know, and this was back in Georgia Tech when they were doing it as well. They don't try to be anything they're not. And because they have the talented players, because they've started to steamroll some success, because it is an SEC football team, they're using that style with talented players to match it. And because of that, they're having a lot of really impressive results. This season, they're a top 25 offense in time of possession. They're a top 20 offense in scoring, third down conversions. Like I said, just a really sound and smart football program under Clark Lee. Now for Alabama, the passing attack is awesome. It almost like at times feels like glimpses of how easy it looked back when Mac Jones was at quarterback for them, back when Bryce Young was under center. It just feels very cohesive, molding into form. It's gotten better every week of this season and had a really great day against Georgia this past Saturday. As important as it's been the proficiency of it, the explosives, the deep shots, the trickery, it's also been the fact that they're so smart with the football. One of 3 teams at the FBS level without a turnover this season. Ty Simpson is in full control of this offense. He does a really nice job of not trying to do any hero ball at all. He understands his role. And I think that is something, and we'll talk about this in a second too, that hurt Alabama a lot last year. I don't mean to say that Jalen Milroe was a bad college quarterback, but it just felt like sometimes he viewed himself, or maybe he felt like he needed to do more than what was expected of him to try and keep Alabama competitive. Now, maybe that's because the rest of the team wasn't as talented as they are now. That's very well the case. Very well could be the case. But it did feel at times that Jalen was doing maybe a little bit too much. I haven't felt like that for a second with Ty Simpson. He is great protecting the football, gives up on plays when they need to be given up on. And he also knows that he's got some really talented Ferraris to work with, along with one of the best play callers in the sport dialing up everything for him. So for Alabama, I've told you since the start of the preseason, since the start of this show, like they were my pick to win a national championship. I think they're one of the best rosters in this sport, and you're seeing it grow with each and every week. Gives you a lot of confidence in where things are heading for this Alabama team. One thing with this game that we do have to talk about is the element of surprise. Last year, Vanderbilt hit Alabama with a sucker punch. And then another one. And then another one, and another one, and just kept having a response every time that Alabama hit an explosive play or kept the game within reach. Vandy just answered with another sucker punch every single time. Remember with this game, it wasn't just Alabama that was caught off guard. It was the entire country. The most shocking result of last season. This win that they had over Alabama had snapped a 10-game conference losing streak that dated back, I believe, over so that would have been the 2022 season was when it started. They lost 10 straight games within the conference. They'd also lost to Georgia State just a couple weeks beforehand. Really just, it was one of those that you left the game being like, this just doesn't make sense. Now, when we look back a year removed, like it does make a little bit more sense because you have the Oklahoma loss baked in for Alabama, the Michigan loss in the bowl game, the Florida State loss. You're like, oh, I can see why that makes sense. At the time, no one would have predicted that this was coming because of that. Because we're here a year later, you're not catching Alabama, nor anybody, by surprise this season. So because of that, what does Vandy need to be able to do to pull off this upset again? Well, first, it's going to be some of the same stuff that they did last year. It's going to start by bottling up Alabama's ground game, something that still hasn't really been strong yet this season, but also just got back its top guy in Jam Miller this past weekend. Kind of like what I was saying with Jalen Milroe last year in the passing offense, the ground game last year at Alabama was so clunky, is the best way to describe it. Jalen Milroe took so many carries, tucked it on a bunch of RPOs or read options. It never felt like any of the running backs were able to get into a good rhythm. And, you look a year later, Justice Haynes had what you would call maybe an underwhelming season with the Tide. He's been really great at Michigan. Jam Miller, I believe, is set for a huge season. I feel like there was just never enough cohesion within the running game where the backs felt like they were actually getting enough of the workload to find a groove, to improve on a weekly basis. I feel like this year on Alabama, everybody knows their role. They know their respective roles, and because of that, you are getting more of that cohesive effort, and something that I think will continue on as Jam Miller gets more game reps in, gets further along with the season. Like, I think this Alabama offense, we've seen it grow since week 1. I still think there's a lot more steps that they're going to be able to take this year. But as of right now, that would be the key thing of Vanderbilt. Well, okay, how can you do that? Can you bottle up Alabama's run game just like you did last time? I don't know if it's going to be as easy this year, because Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for Alabama, has talked about finding other ways to supplant a traditional run it between the tackles type offense. And we saw a lot of that on display this past weekend against Georgia. Screen passes, those handoffs on end arounds that are technically passes, short yardage type plays like that can almost be ways to fabricate a rushing offense and to keep the defense sinking in, because that's what you want. You want to be able to hit those deep shots to your talented receivers, but you need to keep defenses honest. You need to be able to pick up 3 or 4 yards. If maybe you're not doing that traditionally between the tackles, it's got to come by way of screen passes or RPOs, those little plays close to the line of scrimmage that make you have to think both ways as a defense. So I think compared to last year, Alabama has a better ability to do that, to do something that's 3 or 4 yards in the passing game that works like a run without essentially being something in between the tackles. So Vandy's going to have to find a way to hamper that. I'm also not too sure they're going to be able to do that as easily as they were last year, just seeing how much of a nightmare it was for the Bulldogs last weekend. And then on the other side, you're going to need another Diego Pavia masterclass. The one thing I would say that is going to work best for Alabama, or best for Vanderbilt, excuse me, I don't know if Alabama has fixed its issue defending mobile quarterbacks. And that dates till this same game last year where Diego Pavia, I don't think he had a ton of yards, but he ran it 22 times. Jackson Arnold had 120 rushing yards against them later in the season. Thomas Castellanos ran well in week 1. I don't know if Alabama's figured that out. That's going to be offensively for Vanderbilt what they're going to have to do, because if they're getting it to 3rd and 2s and Pavia is able to extend those drives and to pick up first downs with his legs, not only are you going to be able to slowly wear down Alabama's defense like you did last year, you're going to keep this much improved Alabama offense on the sidelines. And remember, this game last year, Vanderbilt won the time of possession battle 42-18. That's minutes. 42 minutes, Vanderbilt held onto the football. Alabama didn't have much time to respond. Now, they did with some nice explosives and kept this thing close. If that's where they're at again, it's going to be hard for Alabama. It's hard for any team to find any sort of rhythm when you only have the football for 18 minutes of a football game. I'm very curious to see if there's been a wake-up call when it comes to defending mobile quarterbacks, because if so, I don't really know what else Vanderbilt might be able to do offensively. I think, we saw Georgia run the ball well against Alabama last week. I think that was more of a sheer volume than it was success or like gashing this Alabama defense. I do think the ground game for Vanderbilt is really good. I just don't know if it's actually going to be something that's dominating outside of Pavia. If you have Pavia running the ball well, then yes, that's going to open up things for your tailback as well. But if Pavia is not running the football as well, if they have gone and made that adjustment to stop the quarterback, maybe you're not going to be able to run the ball as effectively either. So let's land a plane on this. Alabama is 10.5-point favorites right now. The over-under is set at 55.5. I spoke on Monday's show when we finished up the Georgia-Alabama recap and said that winning the big games has never been Kalen DeBoer's issue as a head coach at Washington, at Alabama. It's been playing down to the level of what should be inferior opponents. It's fine to go and beat Georgia twice or to beat Dan Lanning 3 times, but you lost to Jackson Arnold and a bad Oklahoma team, and you lost to Vanderbilt 40-35. Well, this is a big game now. It's not Georgia level, but it's not like you're going up against nobodies. This is a big game. This is a top 25 matchup. This is a chance to get the monkey off your back that's been there for a year now, to make amends for the biggest blemish on your Alabama resume. And I think Alabama has a much better team that's equipped to do so. I think that Vandy is going to be able to fight in between the tackles and find its way to some points. I don't see this being an Alabama blowout, but I will take the Tide to win and cover that point spread by a final score of 35-20, and everyone in that Alabama program will just be able to take a deep sigh of relief and say, okay, we got that one done. We got the big Georgia win. We're slowly becoming what we expected to be. And like I said, we can't be sitting here Monday being like, oh, Alabama was more penalized and they lost the turnover battle and Vandy just wanted it more. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they've learned from their lumps. I think week 1 was as big of a lesson as anything they learned last season. And I think that this will be a convincing enough win where you're like, nope, Alabama, they've got this thing figured out. They're going to be consistently great on a week in, week out basis. So I need a drink of water. Also, one thing that I didn't mention about last week's show, this was so frustrating. The iPad, if you were watching on YouTube, first of all, thank you for doing that. If you're watching on the iPad at about minute 42, the feed just cut out. Now, we had the audio, thankfully, because we record on 2 separate devices, but the iPad just chose to restart. So what I am doing now is every time we take a water break, I'm going to get out of this chair and make sure that damn thing is still recording, because I don't want to be sitting here talking into a video camera that isn't working. So water break. We'll be right back. We'll go into some other big games of the week.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
All right, that video camera is still rolling, so are we. Let's flip it over to a game that I don't necessarily find the most entertaining, but it's still one worth discussing because it is a top 25 matchup, and the first time that these two teams have faced off under those circumstances since 2016. It's Miami at Florida State, massive battle in the ACC. Now, I say that intro, and I don't mean to sound like I think this is going to be a blowout. Not worth the time of day. Don't even bother putting it on your big screen. It's going to be a great game. But I just haven't thought of Florida State as the same type of team that the majority of the country has. You know, since that Alabama game, everybody's put them into the top 15, 10, whatever you may have it. Like, they have said, no, Florida State is one of the best teams in the country. I looked at that Alabama game as very circumstantial. While impressive, you know, Gus Malzahn had an entire offseason to get ready for that specific game, knew the right buttons to press against Alabama, has had Alabama's number, and kind of just beat a team that wasn't viewing Florida State as anything special. Kind of viewed them as like, that 2-10 team, they're not very serious. They went in there and they got their asses whooped. It was a good win, but I didn't leave that being like, Florida State's convinced me. They're a top 10 team. No, I think it was very circumstantial. And because of that, I also wasn't surprised when Virginia upset them this past Friday night. You consider the fact that it was a tough look-ahead spot. You're looking ahead, and 1 week we got Miami coming into town. That's a big one. Oh, but shoot, we have to head up to Virginia. And don't forget, it's a Friday night game. And don't forget, Virginia's actually a little bit better with some really great play at quarterback position. And all of a sudden, you lose that game. And I don't think that this matchup specifically loses a little bit of shine because of that result, because these are two very good teams. But I understood why Florida State lost that game. Situationally, it just made a ton of sense. But we're here to break down the game, not tell you why I don't think highly of Florida State. So let's just get down to brass tacks. The most important thing that Florida State can do this weekend is to stay as patient as humanly possible, which is a really tough thing to do when you are a team coming off of what you'd consider to be a humiliating loss. The natural inclination is to punch quickly, get aggressive, try and make up for all your mistakes last week within the first quarter. That is something that would really worry me if I'm a team that's quarterbacked by Thomas Castellanos. His highs are very high, but his lows are just as low. And this Miami defense is not going to let you march up and down on them. which can be very frustrating when that's been the recipe to your success so far this season. Castellanos is going to have, in my opinion, the most mature game of his career, and understand that this thing is going to go for 60 minutes, no matter what you try and do in the first 10. Do not try and go for the kill shot in the first couple of drives, because against a really good team, that is bound to backfire on you and hurt the situation you find yourself in. So what I mean in a broad sense is that, if Florida State is first drive is a quick 3-and-out, and it's 2 short runs, incomplete pass on third down. They get the ball back. It's still 0-0. 2 short runs. You're faced with a 3rd and long again. And then Castellanos is like, well, I got to find a spark. I mean, we haven't done anything yet. It's been 6 plays. And then he rips a 35-yard shot that gets picked off. That's what I mean. You have to understand that if you are going to stay in with Miami, you have to be ready for a 60-minute dogfight. You are not going to just run this team away like you did Alabama, because actually, do I want to say that just yet? I think I had that later in my notes. Yeah, we're gonna save that piece for later. I was jumping all over with my breakdown. Big wrapping a bow on that. Sorry, totally lost my train of thought there. I just don't want Castellanos to come out thinking he needs to be Superman to punch up and get this out to a 14-0 lead, because I think this is a good enough team where they'll be able to force some pretty, easy turnovers, because you are such a volatile player at the quarterback position. That being said, for Florida State, I think the biggest advantage they have for them in this game is playing inside their home stadium, which, home games are always an advantage. But I think it's the single biggest one they have in the entire game. That place was absolutely rocking against Alabama. I thought it was one of the better home environments we've seen thus far. You've got a revamped, I forget exactly what they did, but construction, revamped stadium. And that was just week 1, when you really didn't know what to expect out of Florida State. Now you have the heightened expectations. You're like, oh, we beat Alabama. We are ranked. Oh, this is an in-state rival coming into town. They're undefeated. What more could you ask for? Like that stadium is going to be absolutely rocking. Don't forget, Miami is also entering its first road trip of the season. So that puts a little light bulb off in my head. I say, well, can we rattle Carson Beck just a little bit? Can we get this offensive line, which is really talented, into some false starts? Can we force a couple of turnovers on fluky plays? This might be the team to do it against, because Carson Beck, as good as he has been this season at home, a couple of games against, nobodies, but a couple good games against Florida and Notre Dame. He struggled on the road last season at Georgia, and he struggled overall, but the numbers dipped drastically when he was not playing at home. Completed 60% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 10 road picks last year. That has got to be music to my ears if I'm the Florida State defense. That environment needs to be rocking, because it has shown over time that you can get to this quarterback in tough road environments. So that's something I'd look to do for Florida State, is obviously get the quarterback rattled, get him to give you a few of those takeaways to where you can now put Miami on the defensive, where maybe you do get out to an early lead because of it, and now they have to force more, and Carson Beck has to force more. That's the plan of attack. For Miami, obviously, I do everything in my power to prevent those numbers from hurting me, those 10 turnovers. I don't want that to pop up and be the stat we're talking about Sunday morning. Use your offensive line. One of the best, biggest offensive lines in this sport. Use your ground game. Hand the ball off to Mark Fletcher and Tramar Brown at minimum a combined 25 times in this game. Get to the 3rd and manageables. Avoid the pressure being put on the shoulders of your quarterback who has struggled on the road. And then trust the talent of your defense to stymie like the explosive but inconsistent Florida State offense. Just do what you want to do. Mario Cristobal, he doesn't want to win games 35-32. He wants to put you in a phone booth, and he wants to fuck your day up for 60 minutes. You can have that type of game here against Florida State. I think you have a talent edge in the trenches. I think you have a size edge. I think you have good experience at certain positions. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to just play my style of football, because that ground game has been awesome. Fletcher and Shamar Brown have been a really bright spot for this Miami offense. Obviously, we knew the offensive line was going to be great, and it's allowed Carson Beck to just have to do enough. And if you can keep that going, if you can play your same brand of football, which I think you'll be able to against the Florida State defense, I don't see you needing Carson Beck to throw the ball 40 times in this game. I think that this Florida State team has a little bit of Vandy in them. And we're just previewing that game, and I'm going to tie in the Alabama loss from week 1 with Florida State. I think they caught the entire country off guard in week 1, beating Alabama. They're 14.5-point dogs on the at home, and they go in. The most shocking result, I think, maybe this season outside of South Florida beating Florida. Is there anything else? Been any other big upsets? Mississippi State beat Arizona State. I don't know. To me, that was the most shocking result so far, outside of Florida losing to South Florida, was Florida State being 2 touchdown underdogs and losing and winning outright over Bama. They showed a ton of fight, played with their hair on fire, and took advantage of a talented but unexpected Alabama team. What did we just say about Alabama playing Vandy this week? They know what's coming this time. Miami knows what to expect from Florida State. This isn't week 1 where all of a sudden you're like, whoa, Florida State's that much better. No, we have 5 weeks of this college football season to know Florida State is a much improved team. Because of that, Miami is knowing what to prepare for. And I think the talent edge at most major positions is still a significant one over what FSU has. I don't know if it'll look pretty for 60 minutes. I don't know if Carson Beck is going to play a great game. But I do think that the Canes will continue on with their undefeated campaign and leave Tallahassee with a win by a final score of 23-14. That is my thoughts on that game. I haven't gotten to the point of fully buying into Florida State. I think they are better. I think they're one of the more improved teams in the nation, but that doesn't mean you all of a sudden become a top 10 team. And I think this will be a lesson. I think Miami will be able to bully them around for a little bit, maybe force Castellanos into a bad game, and win here by a decent margin. I've got 23-14 as the final. So we're going to transition again. I don't have to take a water break, but I got to check on these cameras. So I'll see you in a couple seconds, and we will unveil the Week 6 SpringBlake Sweet 16.
My name's Blake.
I don't know how many times I'm going to need to check this camera, how many episodes we're going to go where I do it in between every break. It's not like it takes that much more time, but I have PTSD. I just couldn't believe when I saw, I finish recording, and then I walk from around this counter and I go hit end on the record button and the iPad was just off. I was devastated. Thankfully, we got 42 minutes out of the hour-long show. Anyways, you guys don't want to hear me talk about that. You want to hear, obviously, because who doesn't, the SpringBlake Sweet 16. My top 16 teams in the country heading into Week 6. We honestly we're not that far off from our preseason poll. And I'll say it every time. There's not preseason expectations built into this anymore. There is not resumes being built into this anymore. This is just if I took Team A and Team B and put them on a neutral field, this is in the order of which I think they'd be favored. So I'd have my number 1 team favored over number 2 over 3, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. These are, to me, what I think are just the best 16 teams in the country. Some of these teams have beaten other teams that, they're lower than. That's just how it goes. I explain it every week. I feel like I have to. Because you put out a poll and people are like, well, this team beat that team and you have that team higher. Yeah, I think if you put them on a field this weekend, that team that lost the first time would be favored again. You can go and bet the underdog to beat them again. Maybe they will. Maybe they just have their number. But that's not what I'm here to do. This is the SpringBlake Week 6. Let's try that again. We got to find a good entrance in. Here is the Week 6 SpringBlake Sweet 16, my top 16 power-rated teams in the nation. Starting at number 16, we've got the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, this is with John Mateer's injury baked into the equation. Honestly surprised that they still landed in the top 16 without him at quarterback for the next couple of weeks, but I think so highly of this defense. I think it's one of the best front sevens in the sport. And since Mateer won't be out for too long, I don't think they're going to lose too much ground in the poll or standings at all. At number 15, I've got the USC Trojans. They fell victim to a really tough situation this past weekend, heading to Illinois for an early game after a late one the week prior, and despite all that, lost a game by way of a game-winning field goal. They showed a ton of fight in that game, some really massive plays from both their offense and their defense. This is the most complimentary football team that Lincoln Riley has had since taking over at USC. I think it's one of the best rosters in the sport, and I think they might get slept on a little bit now because they have that first loss of the year. Not in the SpringBlake Sweet 16, I've got them at 15. Now up to 14, I've got Michigan. It's an interesting viewpoint. It's interesting to look at Michigan these last couple of weeks with Biff Poggi in as the interim head coach. They allowed quarterback Bryce Underwood to just be the athlete he truly is and not force him into this pocket passer type style. They aren't Oregon, they're not Ohio State in the Big Ten, but they're still a really frisky and physical team in the Big Ten Conference. One of what I consider to be an outside threat for the playoffs, but a team more built for the 2026 season. At 13, I've got Texas Tech. The Red Raiders have a roster that is built for the SEC or the Big Ten, but they're playing in the Big 12, so they get a little bit easier of a path through the regular season. There are no guarantees in this sport, but I just don't see another team in that conference that compares to the roster they have at this moment. I think they are far and away the best team in the Big 12 and hopefully headed for a really good season down there in Texas. Now at 12, I've got Indiana. Indiana avoided the trap game at Iowa after its dominant victory over Illinois, and now they get a little break in the action before heading to Oregon in what's going to be a massive week for them next weekend. A win would be monumental, but a close loss would also be a nice consolation prize, as I just don't see Oregon being the reason you're kept out of the playoffs if you handle the rest of your conference schedule. I've said this about Indiana a bunch. If they're a 10-2 football team and those two losses are to Oregon and Penn State, you're putting them in the playoffs. You just are. At number 11, I've got Ole Miss. Now, this is the most unsure I am of a placement of any team in this poll. There is something holding me back from fully believing in Ole Miss as a top 10 team. Honestly, it comes down to just the players on the defense, but the results are saying otherwise right now. I was really impressed with their ability to halt LSU's offense, even knowing that it was a limited group coming in. Their stretch against Georgia and Oklahoma in a few weeks is going to be a lot more revealing, and I feel like I'll get a better understanding of who Ole Miss is at that point. At number 10, I've got Tennessee. Tennessee escaped Mississippi State alive, got really nice play from Joey Aguilar down the stretch to avoid an 0-2 start in the SEC. That game, while shaky at times, showed me more about the improvements of Mississippi State than it did any glaring issues with Tennessee. I still think Josh Heupel's group is one of the best in the nation, despite some up and down performances from his defense. They will certainly be in the mix for the college football playoffs as they navigate through what is their SEC schedule. Now at number 9, I've got Texas A&M. For the Aggies, I want you to just not look at the box score. That was a dominant win over Auburn last weekend, despite the final score being 16-10. The Aggies got their run game going, which was the biggest thing I needed to see from them offensively after it was slow or a little bit shaky to start the year. A steadily improving team here on both sides of the football. We'll have to look the part this weekend against a much improved Mississippi State team coming into town. But man, when you look at the rest of that schedule, it's hard to not visualize a 10-2 year for the Aggies and being almost a lock into the college football playoffs. I've got them at 9. Now, at number 8, I've got the Miami Hurricanes. The Canes are up 7 spots since my preseason poll, the biggest riser in the sport. I've been really impressed with how Carson Beck has operated the offense, and maybe even more impressed with how quickly Corey Heatherman has turned around the back end of this defense. They've got some of the best players in the sport on this roster, and look to be far and away the class of what's an underwhelming ACC. Now, at number 7, I've got Notre Dame. And I will allow this to be the weekly reminder that this is a power rating system and not a resume ranking one. Yes, I know that Texas A&M and Miami both beat Notre Dame this season, but what this rating system is saying is that if you were to put Notre Dame versus either of those teams on a neutral field this Saturday, I think the Fighting Irish would be favored in that game. The offense has looked awesome the last few weeks. CJ Carr really impressive in the development he's had over the first 5 weeks of the season. The offensive proficiency is allowing the defense some time to get its feet wet. I think by the end of the year, you're going to have a really talented Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. At number 6, I've got Texas. Texas has started to see more improvements on offense, while its defense has remained one of the best in the nation. I'm very interested to see how they look this weekend against Florida, a game we'll preview in just a little bit, in what's potentially a look-ahead spot with the Red River Shootout coming up next Saturday. So Texas at number 6. I've got Georgia down a few spots to number 5. Close loss to a really talented Alabama team. You could make the argument they deserve to be lower just with how shaky, flimsy things feel on defense. But we knew this was a young team. We knew it was going to take some time, as all Georgia football teams do. Even if they have one loss by 3 points to Alabama, I'm not sitting here being like, times are a-changin' in Athens. So still feel fine about Georgia. And honestly, it should be a scary thought. If that's your worst result so far this year is a 3-point loss to Alabama, and you've got a really young team, one that is going to consistently get better, Georgia could still be headed for a really great season here. Down 3 spots to my number 4 team in the nation, I've got Penn State. Devastating loss to Oregon. There's no other way to talk about it. But hopefully it's one of those that can flip the energy around the program. I think the offense showed so much promise in that fourth quarter, and I'm curious to see if that style of play is what they feed into as they progress through the regular season. Even if things just stay where they are right now. That was still a double overtime loss to the Ducks, who I think very highly of. This is still one of the more talented rosters and coaching staffs in the country, still deserving of being a top 5 team in college football. At number 3, I've got Ohio State. Ohio State played things safe in Julian Sain's first road trip of the season, and even then, we're still able to drag around a talented but limited Washington football team. The defense looks so damn impressive through the first month of the regular season, and that's allowed the offense to slowly get things rolling as they build up the confidence in their young quarterback. If that growth keeps happening, it's hard to not visualize this team having another deep postseason run when that time comes. Up to number 2, back to where they were in the preseason poll, the Alabama Crimson Tide. Huge get-right victory at Georgia this past weekend where the team's best strengths were on full display. Loaded roster, one of the best passing games in the country, and a defense with studs at every single level. They're starting to resemble the team that I thought they were going to be in the preseason, where I picked them to be the national champions. Gotta avoid Vandy, gotta get past Vandy. You got to treat every game like it's a big one when you're in the SEC, but Alabama is showing me more and more of a team that is built to win it all this postseason. And it should be no surprise that my new number 1 team in the country is Oregon. No team has been more impressive, more dominant than Dan Lanning's Ducks through the first month. I believe right now they're the class of the sport. I know that feels a little overreactionary, whatever you want to call it. But that's a scary thought when you consider how young and how inexperienced this roster is, how many of their key playmakers are still playing their 4th or 5th starts at Oregon or even collegiate career. Oregon, when I think of where they were last year, and it was like a close win over Idaho, and they barely got by Boise State, and then they grew into the team that was, Big Ten champions, to look as good as they do through the month of September. Scary times are coming ahead for Oregon. I feel very confident in that. So that is the SpringBlake Sweet 16 as we head into week 6. Let's take one more break. We've got one more show to recap. I got to check this camera one more time, and we'll be back in a second.
Blake. What?
All right, so let's finish off our show with a game that if you had told me in the preseason, like, hey, rank your 5 or 6 games that you're most looking forward to, this would have easily been on the list, if not at the top of it. And while it certainly won't be a dud, this isn't going to be a game that we don't have to watch, it definitely doesn't have the same shine it had in the preseason. It is Texas at Florida, mid-afternoon kickoff. There is no better word to describe the start for these two teams' seasons than clunky. DJ Lagway and Arch Manning were 2 of the most hyped quarterbacks we had all offseason, and neither have lived up to the billing outside of performances against lower level competition. Now, the why behind that comes from very different angles. For Arch, I believe he's playing through an injury. He just doesn't look like he is playing with the same arm strength he's had at different points of his career. The wincing, the limited offense you can work with him right now. I believe that he is a little banged up. Now, he looked good against Sam Houston State, but I'm also not going to watch one game against one of the newest FBS programs and decide that all my issues can just go parked away into the garage. I still need to see a few weeks of confidence from him and his throwing arm to make me feel like Arch is getting past whatever might have been hurting him the first month of the regular season. So for Arch, it's been the physical limitations. For DJ Lagway, it's been the mental yips. And a 5-interception game at LSU will do that. So will not having, spring ball or fall camp and having all these lingering injuries. Like the mental yips, it makes sense why he has it. He is not trusting his very talented arm. He's not trusting his eyes. It's leading to hesitancy at the position and some really bad turnovers when he does decide to let it rip. Now, while both of those quarterbacks have had their issues, it's the defenses that have kept them afloat. And afloat's a shaky word to say with Florida, but what's kept them even close in some of these games is both have some of the most talented groups on that side of the football in the nation. But for this game specifically, one of them is losing its shine and is in a really unfortunate situation. The injuries that Florida has sustained on that side of the football are just devastating. Already ruled out for this game, you have the edge rusher, LJ McCray. I don't believe, Gum and Sapp are the two starters, but he's been one of their, key guys as a role player at the edge position. They're going to be without their great corner, Dijon Johnson, Aaron Gates, another defensive back already ruled out. And then their best overall player on that defense, Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle, he is ruled out as well. I think he's out for the season. So these aren't just role players you're losing at Florida. These are some of the best guys on the roster. So that really has me worried about how this team is going to be able to hold up against what I still think is a talented Texas offense. I don't think it's as bad as it had looked against Ohio State at certain points. Like, they still have some dudes. It's still Texas. It's still Sark. You still have those 5 stars. I worry, as good as I feel about Florida's offense or defense at certain points, at a certain point, you just lose too many guys to be able to put up much of a fight. And that's hard to not think about with Florida, losing its fight. Something that I already thought we started to see toward the end of that Miami game. This Florida team already did a really nice job responding at the midway point of last football season when Florida was down and out and everybody was counting them out. They finished the year as one of the hottest teams in the country, something that allowed me to buy into the hype for them as they progressed to the 2025 season. I was like, wait a minute, those last results there, like Florida was one of the best teams in the country. Can they do that 2 years in a row? Can you start slow that next season and have that same fight? They already responded for Billy Napier once, and then they've come out flat again. Do you have the mental fortitude to say, Let's give it a go a second time? I'm not so sure. Now, what does help is they're coming off their bye week. They have a refreshed mindset, a little less banged up for some of the guys that are going to be playing in this game. They also get the season debut of Dallas Wilson. We don't really talk about true freshmen that often. When we do, it's typically at the wide receiver position. DeCorian Moore the current year, Jeremiah Smith, and Ryan Williams last year. Dallas Wilson is a 5-star freshman wideout who got banged up in, I believe, fall ball. This is going to be the first game that he plays for the Gators this season. So if there was something to like, maybe we can hang our hat on with Florida, maybe getting a guy that there was a lot of hype around can add some more juice to this offense. So because of the bye week, because of that return, because they responded to Billy once last year, I'm not giving up fully on them yet, but I do think that this will be the last time that they do it, because if the offense starts slow, like it has every other week, and the defense just can't keep Texas out of not even the end zone, but the red zone, if it's just long drives and Texas is hitting field goals or touchdowns and Florida's in 3 and outs like they were the last month of the regular season, this could be the moment where the team lies down for one final time, and Sunday morning we're hearing news about Billy Napier. I'm in a really annoying position with Florida this year. And the line for this game, Texas is set as 6.5-point favorites. The over-under is 41.5. So that reflects what we've seen from both of these quarterbacks this year and these offenses, 41.5 points. Imagine that. I would have guessed, and both have really great defenses, so it doesn't have anything. It's not specifically because of the quarterback play, but like 41.5 is such a gross total for this to be set at. But yes, I'm in a really annoying position with Florida this year. I bought into the hype last year. I rode Florida hard at the end of last year, and they proved me right in those moments by going on a really nice stretch to close out. I still believe when everybody's healthy on this roster, they are a top 10 team in terms of talent. And I just thought that the momentum they carried was going to come through into this season and show up in a big way. I've gotten none of that. But if I didn't jump off the wagon against LSU, and I didn't jump off the wagon against Miami, I'm not going to do it now just for them to figure it out the 1 week I decide to not ride the coattails. I totally see a world where the defense is too banged up to put up any sort of a fight, or a world where the Florida offense just doesn't have any confidence or balance, no matter the return of their talented freshman wideout, or Lagway didn't learn anything or get a fresh mindset off the bye week. Like, I see a world where Texas comes in and is able to drag through Florida like Miami and LSU did. But I also truly do see the side of things where Arch struggles in another tough road environment, where the physicality of Florida's offensive line can maybe somewhat neutralize the Texas defensive front seven, and where Dallas Wilson's return to the football field for the first time in his collegiate career could open up some sort of potency to this passing game. I'm drowning with the ship. I am. I will pick for the third straight time a Florida upset. Final score in this one, 27-21. So I am going with that over bet there. I'm going to take you over 41.5 points. It has to happen at least once. And if it doesn't happen against Texas, maybe I'll give it one more time against A&M if Billy Napier is somehow still the head coach there. Maybe that even more confidence if Napier is let go at that point. But if I rode Florida up to this point, what is the use in me jumping off the ship now? Give me Florida by a final score of 27-21. And man, will that make for some really interesting conversations. Can you imagine how down on everybody Florida has been, and then they go and beat Arch? Woo! We're going to have some fun conversations Monday if that happens. I will just say, you just listen to me break down the game. You know that I'm kind of like, yeah, Texas is probably going to win this one. But I just cannot get off it yet. I can't. Can't get off it. So that is our previews for this week. The last thing that I was going to do was put out some best bets. I'll give you 2 right now, and they involve some of the bigger games of the weekend. The first one is we're going to take Miami's spread. We're going to take them -4.5 at Florida State. I think there's a big enough difference. Even if the home field advantage can give a point or 2 to the Seminoles, I'm going to give Miami to win there by 5 points or more. And then the second best bet of our 5, I'm going to take Michigan's spread against Wisconsin. Last I checked, it was 16.5. I still like it, I would say even up to 19.5 if we start to get some sharp action on Michigan. I think they're a significantly better team than Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin has to go into the gutter before it can do a full reboot, and I think that this would be an outcome that kind of helps that process start. So those are 2 of our 5 best bets of the week. Make sure to head to the socials at SpringBlake CFB, where you can find my entire card. 5 best bets. Again, we're up 4.5 units on the season. We're going to keep making money. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the SpringBlake College Football Show. Like the video, subscribe to the channels, 5-star reviews where you listen. Follow the socials at SpringBlake CFB. I love you. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Peace.